The Christmas tree in Lucas' house was perfect. The lights twinkled softly, reflecting off colorful baubles and golden stars. The family gathered for dinner, laughing and talking while the warmth of the fireplace filled the room. Everything seemed harmonious, until something strange happened with one of the presents under the tree. Lucas had bought a Christmas gadget as a gift for his younger brother, Raphael. It was a sophisticated electronic toy, programmed to make sounds and move, a brilliant invention of Christmas technology. It was the perfect gift, a blend of fun and novelty. But that night, something unexpected happened. The gadget, which had been quiet and seemingly inert, started emitting strange sounds while the family was distracted with dinner. At first, no one paid much attention. Raphael, excited with other toys, ignored the gadget. But soon, a series of increasingly distorted sounds began coming from the device, and gradually, it started moving on its own. The wheels began to spin, and it slowly moved across the room, gently bumping into the legs of the table. It was as if it had a mind of its own. "Are you seeing this?" Lucas asked, looking incredulously at the gadget. At first, he thought it was some sort of programming error, something the toy was designed to do. But when he looked closer, he realized the gadget was moving in a way that wasn't normal. It wasn't just responding to touch, it was acting independently. The gadget stopped for a moment, as if it were assessing its surroundings. Then, it began emitting a series of increasingly louder sounds, almost as if it were trying to communicate. The noise it made was distorted, and its voice, if you could call it that, sounded unnatural. Raphael, curious, moved closer to the toy, but before he could touch it, the gadget suddenly stopped working again. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the object, trying to understand what was happening. What seemed like a simple toy quickly turned into something much more mysterious. Lucas picked up the gadget, trying to turn it off, but the off button wasn't working. The gadget, instead of powering down, seemed to get more agitated with Lucas's touch. It buzzed and vibrated, and its lights flickered erratically. It was as though the toy was refusing to comply, like it had a life of its own. The family tried to laugh it off, attributing the strange behavior to the holiday spirit. "Maybe it's just a glitch," they said. But Lucas, with a growing sense of unease, decided to check the security video. There was a camera in the corner of the room, meant to keep an eye on the gifts and ensure no one tampered with them. When Lucas fast-forwarded the footage to the moment the gadget started moving on its own, he saw something that froze him in his tracks. The face. For a brief moment, there was an image on the screen. It wasn't a glitch or a reflection. It was a face. A pale, almost skeletal face appeared on the gadget's screen, its hollow eyes staring directly at Lucas. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The face was only visible for a moment, but it was enough to send a chill down his spine. Lucas rewound the footage, unsure of what he was seeing. Was it a trick of the light? A reflection of something in the room? No. The face was too clear, too deliberate, and as he advanced the video, he saw something even more disturbing. The face began to move. Slowly, as if it were aware of the camera, the face tilted slightly to the side, and its eyes seemed to narrow, locking directly onto Lucas. He had to pause the video. His heart was racing, and a cold sweat formed on his brow. The idea of what he was seeing seemed impossible. Could a toy really have a face, let alone one so sinister? What was going on? Lucas rewound the footage again, trying to convince himself that it was all just a trick. But each time he watched it, the image only became clearer. The face was smiling, in an unsettling and unnatural way. The video footage was uploaded to the internet, and before long, it went viral. People from all over the world began to share their thoughts. Some thought it was a prank, a clever montage. Others believed that the gadget had somehow become possessed. But the most disturbing thing was the fact that the gadget was no longer in Lucas's house. It had disappeared from the tree, as if it had been taken by something, or someone. No one knew for sure what had happened, but one thing was clear. The Christmas toy, which was meant to bring joy to the family, had turned into something much more sinister, something neither Lucas nor the internet was prepared to comprehend. After the video went viral, Lucas found himself in the middle of a growing storm. News outlets were reaching out to him, trying to get the first exclusive interview, and countless people flooded his social media accounts with comments and questions. Some were fascinated, others were terrified, and a few were downright hostile. What had happened to the gadget? Was it haunted? Or was it just an elaborate hoax? The media frenzy only made Lucas more anxious. Every time his phone buzzed with a notification, he could feel his heart race. The toy's sudden disappearance from the tree only added to the mystery. No one knew where it had gone, and now, every corner of his life seemed to be under scrutiny. He couldn't help but wonder if the toy was somehow targeting him. Lucas spent the night reviewing the footage, trying to find any clue, any small detail that might explain what had happened. But no matter how many times he watched it, the sequence of events only became more confusing. The toy wasn't just malfunctioning, it was as if it had a mind of its own. And the face on the screen, the more he looked at it, the more unsettling it became. He decided to do some research, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain what he was seeing. But every article he found just deepened his confusion. There were stories of strange occurrences around Christmas gadgets, but nothing like what he had experienced. The stories mostly talked about malfunctioning toys, but none of them mentioned a toy that seemed to move on its own and display a face. The more he dug, the more Lucas became convinced that the gadget wasn't just a regular malfunctioning toy. It was something else. Something supernatural. The morning after the video went viral, Lucas woke up to find his phone flooded with messages. He had received dozens of friend requests and comments from people all over the world. They all wanted to know the same thing. What happened to the toy? Some people believed it was a hoax. Others speculated that the toy had somehow become possessed. Lucas wasn't sure what to think anymore. The only thing he knew for sure was that he couldn't ignore what was happening. The toy wasn't just an object. It was alive in some strange way, and it was connected to something much bigger than he could understand. Around noon, Lucas was at his kitchen table when he noticed something strange. The camera feed, which he had left running on his phone, suddenly flashed. He quickly tapped on the app to check, and to his shock, the gadget had appeared again. This time, it was in the living room, sitting in front of the fireplace. But it was no longer on the floor. It was on the coffee table, facing the camera. The toy was still, but the lights on it flickered, and for a brief moment, the face appeared again, more clear than before. The expression was twisted, almost mocking. The face seemed to leer at him. Lucas jumped up from the table, his heart racing. He ran to the living room, but when he checked, the toy was gone. The coffee table was empty. His phone buzzed again, and he looked at the screen. Someone had commented on the viral video. "We've seen it too." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. It was clear now that the toy wasn't just an isolated incident. It was part of something much larger. People were beginning to experience the same strange events he had. And whatever was happening, it was connected to the video. The next few days were a blur of panic. The gadget continued to appear in different locations, always moving on its own, always leaving behind that unnerving face. Sometimes it was on the coffee table, other times it was on the windowsill. But no matter where it appeared, it was always watching Lucas. One evening, Lucas decided to take matters into his own hands. He placed the toy back on the tree, thinking that maybe if it was where it belonged, the strange occurrences would stop. But as soon as he turned his back, he heard the toy move. He spun around, but it was already gone. Lucas tried to tell his parents, but they didn't believe him. "It's just a toy," his father said, dismissing his concerns. But Lucas knew better. He had seen the toy move. He had seen the face. And now, he had to find a way to stop it. The more Lucas tried to ignore it, the worse it became. The toy seemed to be following him, haunting him. And the more he tried to understand it, the more he realized that the toy wasn't just alive. It was manipulating reality itself. The nightmare had only just begun. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences surrounding the gadget only grew more frequent and disturbing. Lucas was now consumed by fear. It was no longer just a toy. It had become an entity, a force that was growing stronger and more aggressive with each passing day. The security cameras had captured even more unnerving footage. The gadget had started to appear not just inside the house, but outside, moving along the perimeter of the property. At first, Lucas thought it was a trick of the wind, or maybe a malfunction of the security system, but the footage was clear. The toy was moving, on its own, outside the house. It started with the figure appearing on the porch, then it began creeping around the yard, always under the cover of darkness. Every time Lucas tried to get closer to it, the gadget would disappear, vanishing before he could touch it. It was as though it was toying with him, playing a game of cat and mouse. The more Lucas tried to understand it, the more it felt like the toy was following him. It was always there, watching, waiting. His house had become a prison, and every room felt like it was closing in on him. The walls seemed to pulse with the presence of the gadget, as if it had somehow become part of the house itself. One night, while trying to get some sleep, Lucas was suddenly woken up by the sound of footsteps. He jumped out of bed and rushed to his bedroom door. But when he opened it, the hallway was empty. He stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, his breath shallow. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the creaking of the floorboards beneath his feet. He moved cautiously down the stairs, feeling the weight of the silence around him. Then, as he reached the living room, he saw it. The gadget. But this time, it wasn't just sitting there, silent. The toy was moving again, slowly, creeping toward the camera. It seemed to have a life of its own, its wheels turning methodically as it approached. Lucas stared in horror as the toy moved closer, its lights flashing erratically. He could feel his breath catch in his throat. How was this possible? He had seen it disappear from the tree. Yet here it was, moving on its own, as if it had never left. In a panic, Lucas grabbed his phone and tried to call his parents. But when he looked back at the screen, the gadget was gone. The feed had cut out, and the camera was now showing an empty room. His heart raced as he ran to the living room, but when he got there, everything was calm. The toy was nowhere to be found. He checked the security footage again, but the video had been deleted. It was as if the gadget itself had erased the evidence. Desperate, Lucas turned to the internet, hoping someone else had caught something similar on camera. But as he scrolled through the viral videos, he found something that made his blood run cold. There were dozens of videos now. People from all over the world had captured strange occurrences involving the same gadget. Some claimed the toy would appear in their homes unexpectedly, moving on its own, while others reported hearing the same disturbing sounds that Lucas had. The toy had become a phenomenon, and the more people talked about it, the more disturbing the stories became. Lucas felt a wave of fear wash over him. He had to get answers. But as he searched for more information, he realized that the toy wasn't just appearing in random homes. It was somehow targeting specific people. People who had seen the video. People who had shared it. And those who had interacted with it seemed to experience increasingly disturbing events. As the days passed, Lucas began to feel like he was being watched. Every time he looked around, he half expected to see the toy lurking in the corner, waiting for him. His once peaceful home now felt like a haunted house, full of whispers and unsettling sounds. And then, one night, it happened again. The gadget appeared. But this time, it wasn't in the living room or the hallway. It was in Lucas' room, right in front of him. The toy was sitting on his desk, motionless, its face still distorted and haunting. Lucas stared at it, frozen in fear. The toy's eyes seemed to follow him, as if it were waiting for him to make a move. Before Lucas could react, the toy began to move again. This time, it wasn't creeping toward him like before. It was charging toward him, faster than he could react. The wheels spun furiously, and the toy's lights flashed wildly. Lucas jumped back, barely avoiding the toy as it zoomed past him, crashing into the wall. Lucas stood there, shaking, as the toy continued to spin in place. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew one thing. The toy was alive, and it was coming for him. Lucas' pulse raced as the toy continued its relentless assault on his sanity. He backed away from the spinning gadget, his breath shallow, eyes darting around the room. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized he had no control over the situation. It wasn't just a toy. It had become a nightmare. The gadget seemed to mock him as it continued its movements, flashing erratically. The distorted face on its screen had faded but left behind an overwhelming sense of dread. The lights flickered, and the toy skittered across the floor, its wheels spinning faster. It was almost as if it were trying to communicate with him, pulling him into its web of mystery. Suddenly, Lucas had an idea. Maybe he could use the same security footage that had started this whole ordeal. If the toy had been visible on the cameras, perhaps there was something in the footage that could give him answers. In a panic, Lucas rushed to the computer and pulled up the footage again. He scanned through the video, fast-forwarding, rewinding, and pausing at different frames. He was desperate to find something, anything, that could explain the sudden presence of the toy. But then, as he scanned through the footage, something caught his eye. The toy was not just moving randomly. It was heading toward the back door. It seemed to be following a path, as though it was leading him somewhere. Without hesitation, Lucas grabbed his coat and ran to the back door. He threw it open, only to be greeted by an eerie silence. The backyard was dark and still, illuminated only by the faint glow of the moon. Lucas stepped outside, his heart racing in anticipation. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. The gadget was sitting on the porch, its lights flashing wildly, and the same haunting face was visible on its screen. It was as though it had been waiting for him, like it knew exactly where he would be. Before he could react, the toy began to move again. This time, it wasn't creeping toward him slowly. It was charging at him, faster than before, its wheels spinning with an unnatural force. Lucas stumbled backward, but the toy was too quick. It crashed into his legs, sending him sprawling to the ground. As he lay on the ground, gasping for air, the gadget screen began to flash in rapid succession. The face on the screen began to morph, its features shifting into something more grotesque. The eyes turned black, and the smile twisted into something malicious, something that sent a chill down his spine. The toy stopped for a moment, hovering above Lucas. Then, without warning, it began to speak in a voice that was both mechanical and distorted, a voice that seemed to come from deep within the gadget itself. "Lucas," it said, its voice echoing around him. "You can never escape me. The words sent a shock through Lucas' entire body. He tried to get up, but the toy had pinned him to the ground, and it was getting harder to breathe. The face on the screen was now completely engulfed by shadows, and the toy's lights flashed erratically, blinding him. And then, as quickly as it had all started, the toy stopped. The lights went out, the screen went black, and the toy went silent. For a few moments, Lucas lay there, unable to move, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The night air was thick with a heavy silence, broken only by the distant sound of crickets. He looked around, and for the first time, the house seemed eerily still, as though nothing had happened at all. But deep down, Lucas knew that the nightmare wasn't over. The toy, the figure, the voice, it had all been part of something bigger, something that he couldn't understand. And as the weeks went by, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next time he would make a mistake. The viral video that had started it all had been taken down by the authorities, but Lucas knew that the footage had been seen by enough people to spread fear across the internet. The toy, and its sinister presence, had become a legend, and no matter how hard he tried to forget, Lucas couldn't escape the sense that something dark, something otherworldly, was still hunting him. Lucas knew the truth now. It wasn't over. The toy wasn't done with him, and there would be no escaping it until he faced whatever was controlling it, whatever dark force had brought it to life. But by then, it might already be too late.